Somewhere this autumn, a person will walk into their own backyard, start a chainsaw, and destroy one of the most useful wild plants on the continent. They won't do it by accident. A neighbor warned them, an article told them to, or the name alone simply sounded dangerous. The plant they're cutting grows tall clusters of deep red cones, cones that taste like cold lemonade straight off the branch, and that dry into the ruby-colored spice the rest of the world pays a premium for. So why does an entire country look at it and reach for a saw? The answer is a single word, and a case of mistaken identity almost 400 years old. Here is the truth the record keeps, even when memory forgets it. A plant does not become dangerous because it shares half of a name. The archive opens. Not in a swamp, but on a dry, sunlit roadside, where this shrub has been standing in plain sight for generations, waiting for someone to read its evidence instead of its reputation. This channel does not deal in fear. It deals in what can be documented, identified, and proven. And the documents are clear. The plant is staghorn sumac. The fear attached to it was inherited, not investigated. Over the next few minutes, we'll do what almost no one ever did. Examine the evidence, separate it cleanly from the plant it's mistaken for, and recover what your great-grandparents simply called a summer drink. Start with the confusion itself, because it is real. Poison sumac exists, and it is genuinely dangerous. The rash it leaves can be worse than poison ivy. The fear was never invented from nothing, but poison sumac and staghorn sumac are not the same plant, and they're not even close. They share one broad family, the same family, oddly, as cashews, mangoes, and pistachios. That is the entire basis of the panic. Now the evidence. The record shows 3 marks that settle the case in about 10 seconds. First, the fruit. Staghorn carries its berries in tight, upright cones, deep crimson, pointing at the sky like torches. Poison sumac hangs its berries low and loose, pale white to gray-green, drooping downward, never standing up. Second, the stem. Young staghorn branches are covered in soft fuzz, like velvet on a deer's antler. That's where the name comes from. Poison sumac stems are smooth and hairless. Third, and treat this only as corroboration, never as proof, the ground. Staghorn favors dry, open, sunny soil, roadsides, field edges. Poison sumac will only grow with wet feet, in swamps and bogs. And staghorn has cousins. The original story leaves out smooth sumac, winged sumac, equally safe, all following the same rule. Red cones standing up, on dry ground, safe. White berries drooping in standing water, leave it. But here is the discipline that matters most. If all 3 marks don't agree, you do not taste it. Certainty first, always. With the plant correctly named, the archive can return what was attached to it. Long before anyone feared this shrub, the nations of this continent treasured it. The Cherokee, the Ojibwe, the Iroquois used staghorn sumac as food and as traditional medicine for centuries. They soaked the red cones in cool water and made a tart, rose-colored drink so close to lemonade that early settlers borrowed it and called it Indian lemonade, drinking it straight through the summer heat. This is not folklore. The ethnobotanist Daniel Mowerman spent decades documenting how native peoples used wild plants, and staghorn sumac appears again and again. A cooling drink, a wash, a household staple. Picture the grandmother's generation here. A jar of red cones on the counter, cool water, nothing more. The knowledge was ordinary. It was passed hand to hand, summer to summer, until somewhere along the way, a single frightening syllable was allowed to erase all of it. And the tartness is not an illusion. It's chemistry you can read. The surface of each berry is coated in malic acid and ascorbic acid. Ascorbic acid is vitamin C. Sailors and frontier families leaned on sour wild fruits exactly like this one to hold off scurvy when fresh food ran out, and the dried cones held their tang for months. A quiet form of insurance against winter. That same chemistry explains the one rule that decides whether your drink is bright or bitter. The flavor, the acids, sits on the surface and dissolves into cool water. The bitterness, the tannins, lives deeper in the plant and is dragged out by heat. So cold water lifts the lemonade and leaves the bitterness behind. Boiling water does the opposite. The record is consistent across every account. Cold, steep, never hot. The people who made this for generations already knew. Here is the irony the archive cannot ignore. While one continent was learning to fear this plant, another was paying handsomely to grow it. By the year 1629, the English herbalist John Parkinson was already cataloging this American shrub as a prized ornamental in the wealthy gardens of England. Grown for its torch-like cones and its blazing autumn color, a century later the botanist Carl Linnaeus gave it its formal scientific name, Rhus typhina. Read that sequence slowly. The plant your neighbor wants to cut down this weekend was once a status symbol in the finest gardens of London. Documented, named, and admired. At the very same time it was dismissed as a roadside weed back home. Nothing about the plant changed. Only the story told about it did. And that is the pattern this archive keeps finding. Knowledge is rarely destroyed in a single dramatic act. It is misfiled, mislabeled. Left to a slow collective shrug. The cones do far more than make a drink. And this is where the forgetting becomes almost absurd. If you've ever eaten za'atar, that tangy spice blend dusted over warm flatbread and roasted vegetables across the Middle East, you have already tasted sumac. The bright, lemony note in that blend comes from dried, ground sumac berries. The jar on the store shelf is usually a Mediterranean cousin in the very same genus, but the staghorn growing wild on the American roadside carries that same sharp, ruby flavor, and it ranks among the more antioxidant-rich spices on the shelf. To be clear, that's about flavor, not health. This is a bright, tart taste, not a remedy, and not a health promise. So the full picture is this. People drive to a store and pay a premium for a small imported jar, while the identical flavor stands ignored on the shrub they're trying to bulldoze. And the uses don't stop at the kitchen. The bark and leaves are heavy with tannins. The same tannins that tanners once used to cure leather and dyers used to set color, that some still use to protect metal from rust. One overlooked shrub, a pantry, a tannery, and a tea, standing at the edge of a dry field. So how do you actually bring it home, safely, and at the right moment? The record corrects a common, costly mistake first. Most people wait until autumn, when the leaves blaze red, to go looking. By then, in many regions, the cones are long past their prime, and waiting that long invites two problems the original story never mentions: mold and insects. Foragers report cones full of tiny worms by late season. So the window is earlier than you think. From mid to late summer into very early fall, while the cones are deep red and firm. In a warm region they may be ready in June or July, not October. Pick on a dry day. A hard rain rinses away the very acids that hold the flavor, and inspect each cone before you use it. Dry, deep red, no mold, no insects. A few safety lines the archive insists on. Sumac belongs to the same family as cashews and mangoes. If you're allergic to those, be cautious and start small. Never harvest from roadsides or lots that may have been sprayed with herbicide. That red cone can't tell you what was applied to it. And if you plant it, know that staghorn spreads fast by root suckers and forms colonies. Give it room, or cut the suckers to keep it in check. Take only what you need. Leave the rest for the birds that depend on it through winter. The drink itself is almost embarrassingly simple. Snap off a few of those deep red cones and break them apart into a jar of cool or room temperature water. Let them steep for 10 to 20 minutes, and watch the water slowly blush a deep, clear pink. Then strain it, through a coffee filter or a clean cloth, to catch the fine hairs, and sweeten it however you like. Cool water, never boiling. That single choice is the difference between bright lemonade and a harsh, mouth-puckering cup. And if you dry those same cones and grind them, you've just made your own jar of that expensive imported spice, for nothing. One shrub. A summer drink and a pantry staple, from a plant most people are taught to walk past, or cut down. So here's a question worth leaving in the comments. Have you ever walked right past these red cones without knowing what they were? Step back, and the real question isn't botanical. It's human. How does a plant this useful slip out of an entire culture's memory? Not with a ban, not with a scandal, with a slow shrug, one cautious generation at a time, until all that remains is the half of a name that frightened people. The deeper loss isn't the lemonade. It's the habit of looking at the living world and reaching for a saw before reaching for the evidence, destroying first and asking questions later, if at all. This archive exists to reverse that order. Evidence first, then the story, then maybe the glass. So this season, when the leaves begin to turn, and you spot those brilliant red cones standing tall along a dry roadside, you'll know exactly what you're looking at. Not a threat. A glass of lemonade that has been waiting on the branch the whole time, and a spice the rest of the world never stopped paying for. The archive closes, but the shrub at the edge of the field is still standing, and now the record is yours to keep. If recovering what was wrongly buried matters to you, stay close. There is a whole continent of forgotten plants still out there, and the next file is already waiting to be opened.